My name is Delia Hargrove. After 16 loyal years, my boss looked me in the eye and called me useless, then erased me from the company I helped build. I sat in silence as he rewrote the truth until I couldn't anymore. What I did next nearly brought the whole house of lies down. And I don't regret a thing. Stay with me till the end. Hear what happened, what I risked, and what I reclaimed. Then tell me, did I do the right thing? Would you have done it differently? I'd truly like to know. It's strange, the things you remember when your world comes unglued. The scent of burnt toast from the neighbor's window. The weight of the coffee mug in your right hand. The way your badge brushed against your blouse collar as you locked the front door behind you, just like you had for 16 years. I still had that badge around my neck when he called me useless. That Monday morning in Tucson had the kind of crisp stillness that makes you think the day will be quiet. The sky was clear, and the air smelled of desert sage and exhaust. I parked in my usual spot at the far end of the lot. Habit, not preference. My old Camry hummed softly as I sat there for a few seconds longer than usual, listening to the tick of the cooling engine. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe some kind of sign. A bird to fly into the windshield, or the radio to crackle with breaking news. But nothing came. I straightened my navy blouse, grabbed my bag, and headed inside. Rose Hill Cafe was 2 blocks down from the office, and I stopped there like always, half almond milk latte, no sugar, and a cinnamon twist that I always told myself I wouldn't finish but always did. The barista, Lena, gave me a tired smile and slid my order across the counter. "You look sharp today," she said. I smiled back, murmured a quick thanks, and kept moving. I wasn't sharp. I was tired. Not the kind of tired you shake off after a good night's sleep. The kind that wraps around your bones and stays there. Virexen Builders looked the same as it had every Monday since 2008. Polished concrete floors, glass walls that offered no privacy, and the faint smell of industrial-strength cleaning spray trying to hide something else. Only this morning, the air felt different. People didn't say good morning. A few nodded. Most didn't. Even Marcus from tech support, who always made some joke about my dinosaur desktop setup, just kept walking past. I reached my desk and noticed the first red flag. My chair was slightly turned. Not a big deal to anyone else, but I never left it that way. Next to my keyboard sat a single sheet of paper. No envelope, no name. Just a subject line typed in bold. 9 a.m., 5th floor conference room. Mandatory. No context. No sender. Just the building's internal header. I sat down slowly, trying not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a routine update. A new software policy. Budget restructuring. But my gut already knew. It had known for weeks. Maybe even months. At 8:12, Emmett Voss passed by my desk. He didn't stop. Didn't nod. Just walked by with his hands in his pockets, gaze flicking briefly to my screen. He had that polished, effortless look, hair always in place, shirt sleeves rolled to just the right length, like he'd studied how to appear competent more than how to be it. He said, casually, almost like it was a compliment, "Still clinging to those legacy protocols, huh?" I looked up. "They still work." He smirked. "Until they don't." Then kept walking. Something about the way he said it felt like a door closing. I opened the HR system to review my team's metrics for the week, and that's when I saw it. An altered employee file with my digital signature, but I hadn't touched that document. And next to it, another file. An email chain between Emmett and someone at Norn Capital, one of our newer investors. The subject line read, "Internal restructuring, final phase." No attachment. Just a trail of emails, CC'd to no one else. The last line from Emmett. "We'll eliminate the outdated tier quietly. She won't see it coming." My mouth went dry. At 8:47, Sheila Tran passed behind my chair. She leaned in just slightly and said under her breath, "Be careful today. Something feels off." I turned, but she was already gone. When the elevator dinged at the 5th floor, I stepped into the hallway with a heart that hadn't settled since the moment I saw that email. The walls looked the same, sterile white, interrupted only by company plaques and motivational posters no one read anymore. I reached for the conference room door. The knob was cold. My badge hung heavy against my chest. And when I stepped inside, no one looked up. Not yet. My nameplate wasn't where it always had been. My usual seat, the one near the head of the table, left side closest to the whiteboard, was taken. A junior finance manager I barely knew had slid into it like it had always been his. I stood there for a second, unsure whether to say something. Then I chose a seat farther down, near the coffee urn. Not that I wanted any. My stomach had already twisted into something hard and sour. The room was unusually quiet. No one was chatting, no idle laptop clicks, no nervous laughter. Just the hum of the AC and the occasional shuffle of paper. A few folks nodded as I sat, but most kept their eyes fixed on their phones or notebooks. Then the door opened, and Emmett walked in. No assistant, no laptop bag. Just one folded sheet of paper in his hand. He didn't sit, didn't smile, just stood at the front of the room, like a substitute teacher who already knew half the class was going to fail. "We need to clarify accountability," he said. "Specifically, regarding the recent turnover in engineering and systems." His voice was steady, but there was a sharp edge to it, like a knife that had been polished just for this occasion. A few people shifted in their seats. One guy coughed. No one spoke. "I've reviewed the exit data," Emmett continued, unfolding the paper slowly. 14 resignations in 8 weeks. That's not a wave, that's a hemorrhage. And frankly, we have to ask what HR has, or hasn't, done to prevent it. I sat straighter. My mouth felt dry, but I spoke anyway. "With respect, Emmett, we flagged retention concerns months ago. The reports were sent to your office. We recommended retention bonuses, flex time for senior engineers." He held up a hand. "Let's not get into excuses." That stopped me cold. I wasn't making excuses. I was offering facts. But he wasn't looking for those. He scanned the room as if to say, "See? This is why we're here." Then he turned back to me. "You've been here a long time," he said. "Longer than anyone else in this room." He let that hang for a second before continuing. "You're the last holdover from when my father ran this company. And frankly, that legacy isn't doing us any favors anymore." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew this wasn't about discussion. This was a performance. I looked around the table. Some eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. Others stayed locked on their notepads, scribbling nothing. No one said a word. No one asked for clarification. No one questioned the data. No one stood up. The silence was louder than anything Emmett had said. He folded the paper again, very precisely, and tucked it into his blazer pocket. "Effective immediately," he said, "we're restructuring the HR department. We'll begin transitioning responsibilities to a new model starting next week. But if you prefer to begin your exit process today, we'll respect that choice." I stared at him, trying to find some trace of the young man I'd mentored. The one who'd once asked me how to lead without being feared. I'd taught him how to run staff meetings, how to settle disputes without throwing anyone under the bus. I'd covered for him more than once when he was still finding his footing. And now, here he was, telling me, plain as daylight, that I was no longer wanted. There was no anger in his voice. No apology either. Just cold efficiency. "I'll need your transition notes by end of week," he added. "Assuming you're staying that long." I nodded once. Not because I agreed, but because I needed to keep my face neutral until I got out of that room. As I stood, I noticed a small crack in the conference table. It hadn't been there before. Strange, the things you see when everything else blurs. No one stood with me. No one followed me out. The door clicked shut behind me, and just like that, I wasn't part of the room anymore. I walked down the hall, past photos of company retreats and charity events I'd helped organize. Past a wall of framed awards I'd once written the nomination blurbs for. Every step felt like I was peeling something off myself, something heavy and familiar. And in that quiet hallway, one truth settled in deeper than anything else. They weren't just pushing me out of a job. They were erasing me from the story. I walked back to my desk like a ghost. Not one person made eye contact. They pretended to type, to read, to scroll through reports. The silence was thick, like everyone was waiting to exhale once I disappeared. I didn't cry.
I didn't yell.
I just sat down in the same chair I'd occupied for 16 years and stared at the framed photo of the employee picnic from 2011. I was in the back row, holding the grill tongs, wearing a faded company t-shirt, and laughing at something someone had said just off camera. Back when people still believed we were building something together. Now, I was a line item to delete. I opened the desktop drawer where I kept the binder I'd made. HR continuity, procedures, and transitions. I'd updated it every quarter for years. No one ever asked me to, but I believed in leaving things better than I found them. That's how I was raised. That's how I'd worked. I started gathering the documents they'd need if I really was leaving. Organizational charts, payroll vendor contacts, staff development schedules. I moved slowly, methodically, trying not to feel. But it crept in anyway, this thick, slow ache in my chest, like my ribs were closing in. I clicked into the personnel management system out of habit, thinking I'd download a few final reports to include. And that's when I noticed the first red flag. A termination record I didn't authorize. I froze, blinked twice, and pulled it up again. The employee's exit was timestamped 2 weeks ago, but I never approved it. I would have remembered. I looked closer. There was a digital signature in my name, but the IP address linked to Emmett's office. I clicked over to another record, same thing. The audit trail was scrubbed. Emails erased. Notes gone. There were half a dozen terminations I hadn't signed, all recently added. Then I saw a file labeled Q4 Optimization Summary, internal use only, buried deep in a shared drive I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside was a breakdown of contractor payments. A pattern emerged fast, multiple checks issued to names I didn't recognize, with vague project descriptions. A few of them even used the same bank routing number. That wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. That was deliberate. Freelancers paid under fake identities. Terminated employees whose data had been overwritten. Ghost payroll entries that made our headcount look higher than it really was. Someone had been cooking the numbers. And Emmett had blamed me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. The betrayal landed heavier than the insult. I'd spent years warning him, flagging burnout, suggesting team structure reviews, trying to slow down the hiring sprees he insisted on. But he never listened. I was too cautious, old school, afraid of growth. He wanted someone who'd nod along and not ask too many questions. He knew exactly what he was doing this morning. He'd set it up for weeks, maybe longer. Hey. The voice came soft from my left. I turned. It was Sheila. She stood next to my desk, holding 2 coffees. She offered one and sat in the extra chair without waiting for an invite. I couldn't say anything in that room, she said quietly. But I need you to know you're not alone. I wrapped my hands around the cup without drinking. You saw it coming? She gave a slight nod. Not all of it, but I knew something wasn't right. I overheard Emmett on the phone last week, bragging to someone from the investor group. Said he was finalizing the last piece of internal cleanup. I didn't think. I hoped it wasn't you. I swallowed the tightness rising in my throat. He forged approvals in my name. Fired people under my ID. She didn't even look surprised. That hit harder than I expected. Then she reached into her tote and slid a printed email across the desk. This got sent to me by mistake. I think he meant to forward it to himself. I printed it before he could delete the chain. I picked it up, hands suddenly cold. It was from Emmett to someone named Owen Mercer at Norrin Capital. The subject line read, Stabilization through internal restructure. His message boasted of tightening legacy overhead and implementing generational transitions. One line stood out like it had been written in bold. We've neutralized the last internal resistance. HR oversight is no longer an obstacle. Sheila said, He used you, Delia. You were the last piece in his way. He needed to discredit you to clean house without anyone asking why. I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not yet. More like the quiet, searing clarity of being done. Done protecting people who didn't deserve it. Done pretending things would get better if I just stayed the course. I'd always believed in giving the benefit of the doubt. In being steady, dependable, the person who held things together. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the hum of the old ceiling fan above me, my fingers clutched around the edges of the comforter, like I was holding onto something bigger than fabric. The house was still. Too still. I kept thinking about all the times I had kept quiet, years of swallowing frustration, letting slights slide, nodding through meetings where I knew damn well the decisions being made would backfire. All because I believed I was doing the right thing. For the company. For the people who worked there. For the name I'd helped protect, even after it no longer meant what it used to. And look where that got me. Used. Erased. By someone who had never even read the employee handbook until I handed it to him. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. It didn't roar through me like some cinematic epiphany. It was quiet, like a steady voice inside that had finally been given the floor. I made a pot of coffee. No cream, no sugar. Just hot, black, and bitter, the way my mood had settled. By 7:15 a.m., I was parked outside Verexen again. I'd been granted one more day of access to support transition. How generous. When I stepped inside, the receptionist looked up and then immediately looked back down at her screen. I didn't blame her. I was now the woman no one wanted to be seen standing next to. That label sticks faster than gum on a sidewalk. I walked straight to my desk and powered on the desktop. Still logged in. 12 hours. That's all I had left with full credentials. I clicked through folders I'd built and guarded like a second skin. Compliance logs, onboarding archives, flagged violations I'd reported, and watched disappear into black holes. There it all was. Still intact, but for how long? I started downloading, securely, carefully, naming files with date stamps and backup references. Nothing altered. Nothing exaggerated. Just exactly what I'd seen and lived with for the past 2 years. The emails were the hardest. Threads I'd forgotten about, buried exchanges where I had flagged concerns only to be dismissed with, "We'll revisit next quarter." Or, "Let's not complicate the pitch." Emmett's replies always had that silky vagueness, polite on the surface, designed to go nowhere. By noon, I had a single, clean, encrypted folder. Everything labeled, sorted, time-stamped. Truth, neat and complete. I could have sent it anonymously, but I didn't. I drafted 2 emails. The first went to Beck and Moore, the legal firm that handled our ethics compliance, supposedly reporting directly to the board. I kept it short. Attached are records pertaining to ongoing financial and employment misrepresentations at Verexen Builders. These include altered employee files, unreported terminations, and fabricated contractor payments. Please review under the current compliance obligations set by state law and board governance. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. The second email went to the Arizona State Auditor's office. There was a direct line for anonymous whistleblower reports tied to public tech contracts. I attached the same folder and typed, "This information does not require a response or acknowledgement. I only ask that it reaches someone who still believes in accountability." I hovered over the send button. Not because I was afraid, because I knew once I clicked it, I couldn't take it back. And that felt right. I hit send. Then I stood up, took one last look around the office. The team photos on the wall, the quarterly goals chart with markers I used to refill myself, the stupid beanbag chairs Emmett installed to make the place feel younger. None of it meant anything now. I walked to the elevator. The halls were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that comes after something cracks but before it collapses. Outside, the sky had turned a shade grayer than it had been that morning. A light rain had started, soft, steady. The kind that makes everything smell clean again, even if only for a little while. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. I let the rain hit my face as I walked toward my car. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Step by step. A week passed. Not a long time by most people's clocks, but in the world of corporate panic, 7 days can feel like a tectonic shift. Just long enough for truth to settle into the cracks. I was in my kitchen, coffee in hand, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The news app refreshed itself on my phone as I scrolled half awake. That's when I saw it. Tucked beneath wildfire alerts and a weather warning for northern Arizona, the headline read, State auditors investigate Virexin builders after alleged reporting irregularities. My thumb froze mid-scroll. The article was brief, no names, no drama. Just a plain, cautious paragraph about potential misrepresentation in staffing records, particularly those tied to public sector tech contracts. It cited an anonymous internal source, and it mentioned very specifically the number of employee exits I had documented. I set the phone down, slowly, as if the weight of the truth was too heavy to hold in my hand for long. My eyes drifted to the window. Nothing had changed outside. Same faded patio furniture. Same half-dead rosemary bush in the corner that I kept telling myself I'd trim next weekend. The world hadn't exploded. No storm clouds had rolled in. And yet, something in the air felt different. Not victory. Not relief. Something subtler. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for too long. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Sheila. "They're in free fall," she said before I could even say hello. Her voice was tight-clipped. Closed-door meetings all morning. Emmett's pacing like a caged animal. Department heads pulled in one by one. "Did they say anything official?" I asked. "Nope. But people are talking. A few have connected the dots back to your records. Those date-stamped audit logs? They're yours." I didn't speak right away. There was nothing to say. Sheila continued, more softly now. "They don't know it was you. But I do. And I want you to know, I'm proud of you." For a moment, I just sat there with the phone against my ear, eyes fixed on the kitchen tile. The grout needed scrubbing, I noticed. Then I heard myself say it before I really thought about it. I didn't do it to make a point. I did it because I couldn't pretend anymore. She paused. "Still, you did it. And it's making a difference." We hung up not long after. I opened my laptop, checked my email out of habit. I half expected a message from Emmett, maybe legal jargon wrapped in polite threats, or a sudden offer to talk. But there was nothing. Until 2 days later. Sheila forwarded me an internal email, something passed to her from someone in finance. I didn't ask how she got it. I didn't need to. The subject line was simple: managing fallout. It was sent by Emmett to Virexin's in-house legal team and a few strategic advisors, whatever that meant. And in the middle of the thread, between bluster and vague damage control, sat a sentence that stopped me cold. "If she thinks she's safe out there, she's mistaken. I have people who can make this go away." Quietly. Beneath it, Sheila had written only, "He's talking about you." And she was right. I knew it immediately. There was only one person who used my exact timestamp format. A small thing, month spelled out, day in 2 digits, year abbreviated. It was something I learned years ago in compliance training, a habit I never broke. Emmett had noticed. And now it had betrayed me, in the best possible way. I leaned back in my chair, email still open. Heart beating slowly, steadily. Not panic. Not even anger. Just confirmation. He wasn't afraid because I'd done something reckless. He was afraid because I'd done something measured, clean, and true. Something he didn't expect from someone like me. He thought I'd fade quietly. He thought the end of my contract was the end of my voice. But it wasn't. The fallout spread quickly. Rumors of frozen accounts. Calls from vendors asking why payment timelines were missed. And a big one. The Canadian infrastructure firm we'd spent months courting? They pulled back, citing regulatory uncertainty. Someone from the state auditor's office had officially requested 2 years' worth of payroll and vendor logs. Virexin wasn't burning because I lit the match. It was burning because it had been a bonfire waiting for a breeze. That night, I didn't check the news again. I didn't refresh my inbox. I poured a glass of water, stepped out onto my back porch, and watched the skies settle into night. A train horn sounded in the distance. The air smelled like dry grass and a little bit of freedom. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. I turned it face down. For once, I didn't need more information. Because the silence around me wasn't fear anymore. It was earned peace. I saw the article late on a Thursday night, a link dropped into my inbox by someone I didn't recognize. The headline read, "Disgruntled former HR exec behind Virexin leak?" No byline. No verified sources. Just vague accusations and a tone slick with smear. The kind of piece that pretends to ask questions but really just points a loaded finger. It accused me of sabotaging the company because I couldn't accept being let go. Said I had a known history of resistance to progressive leadership and difficulty adapting to the evolving workplace. That part almost made me laugh, if it hadn't felt like someone twisting a knife they never earned the right to hold. The real sting came with what followed. My name was tagged across a half-dozen social media platforms. Former coworkers stayed quiet publicly, but I could feel the shift. A few subtle unfollows. No one rushing to clarify or correct. Then came the direct messages. You bitter old hag. Jealous much? The company moved on. Why can't you? Should have retired when you had the chance. None of them had real names attached, but they didn't need to. The intent was loud and clear. I closed the apps, tossed my phone onto the coffee table, and sat in the silence of my living room. For the first few minutes, I didn't even move. I just stared at the lamp in the corner, the one I'd bought on clearance at Target after my divorce, and waited for the familiar ache in my gut to come. It didn't. Not the way it used to. But something else did. A memory I hadn't invited. Years ago, in a very different life, my ex-husband came home late again. He smelled like a hotel room and bourbon, and when I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, "If you weren't so hard to be around, maybe I wouldn't need to find peace elsewhere." That night, I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I swallowed my rage and went to bed quietly, thinking that silence was strength. But silence isn't strength. It's erasure. And this time, I wasn't going to disappear. The next morning, I walked into Rose Hill Cafe and ordered my usual. The barista, Lena, handed me my coffee with a slight frown. Rough week. I nodded. It's not over yet. I took my laptop to the back corner booth and opened the blank document. The cursor blinked at me like it was daring me to speak. So I did. I didn't write a takedown. I didn't name names or throw stones. I simply told the truth, from my side in my voice. I wrote about loyalty, about how it looks different when you've poured years of your life into a place, about how it doesn't mean silence, about how the hardest decision I've ever made was choosing integrity over comfort. I ended with a line I'd been carrying in my chest since this all began. Loyalty should never be rewarded with humiliation. Then I hit publish. I emailed a lawyer, someone I trusted from a nonprofit I'd once volunteered with. Sent over a copy of the article and requested a takedown notice. Defamation wasn't always easy to prove, but we had enough. And then, I waited. But not for long. Within hours, my post started to gain traction. First a few likes, then shares. Comments poured in from strangers, HR managers, executive coaches, women in tech, men in education, folks from fields I'd never touched. One said, "I've been carrying this story for years. Thank you for speaking it out loud." Another wrote, "You said what so many of us couldn't." By the end of day 3, the post had been shared over 10,000 times. People weren't rallying behind me because I was some kind of hero. They were showing up because they saw themselves in what I'd written. They'd been shut out, disrespected, tossed aside quietly, and expected to keep quiet in return. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't need to. What I felt was real. The fear I'd carried for so long, that if I spoke, I'd lose whatever sliver of belonging I still had, was gone. And in its place was something I hadn't felt in years. My own voice. Clear. Unapologetic. And finally mine. The email came at 6:17 a.m. on a Monday. Subject line: Opportunity for private resolution. Sender: Emmett Voss. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the preview from across the kitchen while my oatmeal cooled untouched. Something about the wording already told me what was inside. Not a threat. Not an apology. Something slipperier. A few hours later, I sat at my desk and clicked it open. Delia, I believe this entire situation has stemmed from a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. I'd like to meet privately to clarify things and ensure that both our reputations remain intact. I still respect the work you did here and would rather see this resolved professionally than publicly. Let me know what time works best. Emmett. No acknowledgement of the internal investigation. No mention of the article or the audit. Just that vague respect, wrapped in the tone of a man trying to put a fire out before the smoke reached his shirt collar. I took a deep breath, pushed my chair back, and typed one sentence. I'll meet you Thursday at 9 a.m., same place you ended it. I wasn't going for drama. I just wanted to look him in the eye one last time, on my terms. The fifth-floor conference room was empty when I arrived. Still smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. Same long table. Same dry markers in the tray that no one ever replaced. He walked in a few minutes later, dressed like he always was, crisp suit, perfect tie, calm face. He smiled like we were about to talk about next quarter's budget, not the wreckage left in his wake. Delia, he said, closing the door behind him. Thanks for agreeing to this. I didn't smile back. Let's get to it. He eased into a chair like this was his show. We've both made decisions that, in hindsight, may not have served our best interests. But we've also built a lot here. I'd hate for either of us to walk away with resentment when we once worked so well together. I watched him speak like I'd watched him perform in board meetings, measured, rehearsed, just enough charm to look like sincerity. We both know, he went on, you are part of something special here. A foundation. But things evolve. Companies have to grow. I tilted my head. Grow? Or forget? He didn't flinch. Just smiled again. Look, he said, I'm offering you a chance to walk away clean. No more speculation. No more stories. We can issue a joint statement. Say your departure was planned. Respectful. Classy. You deserve that. There was a moment, just a moment, where I saw a flicker of worry behind his eyes. He needed this wrapped up. But I didn't come here to make him feel safe. I didn't send the documents to destroy you, I said. My voice was even firm. I sent them because no one in that room had the spine to say what was happening. And you knew that. You counted on it. He leaned forward, trying to smile it off. Delia, come on. That kind of language doesn't help. I kept going. You created an environment where silence was the price of keeping a job. And when I stopped paying it, you acted like I'd broken some sacred code. I didn't. I just stopped pretending. That was when it happened. His tone snapped. You're clinging to old ideals, Delia. You're a woman of a different time. You think virtue means power. It doesn't. It slows everything down. It complicates growth. This company needed people who could push forward without dragging in moral baggage. The words hit the table like spilled ink. Ugly. Messy. Irreversible. I stood up slowly. Gather my coat. He stayed seated, probably thinking I'd throw a parting jab, maybe storm out in some grand, dramatic sweep. Instead, I just looked at him and said, I'm glad I'm no longer part of the future you're shaping. Then I walked out. No applause. No music swelling. Just the soft click of my heels on tile and the steady beat of my own breath. Down the hall, past the old quarterly charts and photo walls now cluttered with slogans Emmett had plastered everywhere. Move fast. Think big. Stay lean. I stepped into the elevator, looked at my reflection, and saw someone I recognized. This wasn't a win. It was something quieter. Stronger. 3 weeks later, Virexen Builders officially folded. The press release used words like strategic dissolution and unexpected restructuring failures, but everyone knew the truth. The investors pulled out. The state audit found enough irregularities to trigger a full financial freeze. And while Emmett wasn't hauled off in handcuffs, he was barred from holding any executive role in the tech sector within Arizona for the next 5 years. It was over. Not just the company. Not just the damage. But the illusion that silence could protect anyone. That morning, Sheila sent me a one-line message. I didn't expect justice to come this fast. But you were right. Truth doesn't need to rush. It just needs space. I didn't reply right away. I sat with that sentence for a while. Let it land. The offers started trickling in around the same time. A couple of startups from Phoenix, a mid-sized firm in Dallas, even one recruiter who claimed they'd followed my story and admired my values. I didn't take any of them. Not because I was afraid. Not because I didn't need the work. But because I wasn't chasing stability. I was choosing alignment. And that takes time. Instead, I spent quiet mornings reworking my resume. Not editing history, just rearranging it. I dropped Verexin from the headline and moved it to a supporting bullet. The story didn't need to be front and center anymore. What mattered now was how I showed up moving forward. I signed up for a course, mid-career coaching certification, tailored for women over 50 looking to change lanes. It felt strange, sitting in a virtual room full of strangers again. But it also felt right. A few days later, a local nonprofit called Phoenix Pathways reached out. They ran a mentorship program for women re-entering the workforce after long breaks, caregivers, former inmates, survivors. They wanted someone to help design workshops on professional boundaries, resilience, and ethics. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. On a Friday afternoon, I met Sheila for coffee at Rose Hill Cafe. She waved when I walked in, already halfway through a matcha latte and scrolling her phone. "You look lighter," she said as I sat down. "I feel it," I said, smiling. And I meant it. We talked about her next move. She was considering freelance work, consulting. Said she was done with climbing ladders she didn't believe in. I told her that made two of us. After a moment, she leaned back and asked, "If you had the chance to go back, would you stay quiet this time?" I didn't need to think about it. "No," I said. "Silence makes you disappear, even when you're still breathing." She nodded, and we both looked out the window at nothing in particular. Just two women who'd made it through. I left the cafe on foot, deciding to walk the long way home. The air was warm, but not heavy. One of those late spring afternoons when the light softens just enough to make everything feel like memory. I passed rows of one-story houses, front lawns with patchy grass, porch swings that creaked in the wind. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, and a teenager rode past on a bike, earbuds in, face toward the sky. I stopped in front of the small print shop 2 blocks from my street. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. "Hi," I said to the man behind the counter. "Just picking up a document under Hargrove." He handed me a manila envelope. I thanked him, stepped back outside, and opened it as I walked. Inside was a single page, my updated resume. Clean. Clear. Nothing dramatic. But on the second line, right under my name, was something new. Independent consultant. Workplace ethics advisor. I folded the page and tucked it under my arm. I didn't need to make a point to anyone anymore. But I needed that line for me. As I turned the corner toward my street, I thought back to all those times I'd bitten my tongue, softened the truth, told myself it wasn't the right moment. And I thought about how easy it is to mistake peace for obedience. How often we confuse quiet with survival. I used to believe that silence kept the peace. But the truth is, there are moments when peace requires a voice. And I had finally chosen to use mine. For no one else. Just for me. Before we wrap up, I just want to say this. Maybe you've been there too. Sitting in a room where your voice didn't matter. Swallowing truths to keep the peace. Pretending silence was strength. But sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is stop pretending. I didn't tell this story to prove anything. I told it because I know how heavy it can feel to carry what's right all by yourself. And if this story found you at the right time, maybe as a reminder, maybe as a quiet nudge, I hope it stays with you. If it touched something in you, I'd love to have you along for the next one. There's more to say, and maybe more we can heal together.